Okay, we are recording now on the cloud. And we are officially live. All right, everybody, welcome to our topic today. This is your Tuesday training, and I am here with Christy. She is a licensed clinical social worker and certified yoga teacher, and she owns her own practice called Verbena Counseling. And I'm so grateful to have you here with us, Christy. Can you give us a little bit of insight into your background and really you working with your clients?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Um, it's hard to give a background and want to keep it simple, but really, I just have always been a person that really liked to interact with people. Previous jobs, I would just find myself chatting with people and hearing their stories and my own journey of mental health and the support I got really led me to wanting to be a social worker, specifically a therapist in private practice. And so, yeah, that's just a little, very, very short snippet of like what brought me here. Yeah.
Awesome. And when you told me this before about the name of your practice, can you tell us a little bit more about how you chose that?
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
I really love nature. I think it just getting outside and being outside and outdoors is like the one way and one of the few places I really feel connected to myself and I can know what's happening in my body. It's just very, very lovely for me. So I wanted something that was reflective in my practice of that. So a verbena plant is a plant. It's a flowering plant that can survive in harsh conditions, like lots of sun, can grow on rocks. So it can survive. But what's nice about it is it can really thrive when it's tended to by a gardener or someone who's taking care of the plant. And so I liken that to therapy. We can all survive. We are surviving, right, through the pandemic and all of our life stresses. And yet therapy can be really that place where we can flourish and find ourselves in a really good place.
Awesome. And even just hearing your story about your experience and kind of even what led you to become a therapist is going through that process yourself. And I have also gone through therapy and I found so much value in just having someone who is that third party or just that other person that isn't necessarily in your world, because it's a great space to feel safe and connected with someone that doesn't necessarily know your whole life story, or at least yet, until
Yeah.
you start
Yeah.
talking a little bit
Right.
more about it. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. Even just like you're saying, with the relationship between that story and your name, is that nurturing aspect of it. And so in nature, we all have things that we're going through and things that are going on in our life and our world, and to be able to then bring it back to that nurturing aspect of having that other person be that ear and working with your clients in that way. So
Yeah.
love to hear a little bit more about, what you feel is maybe some of the biggest topics that you cover with your clients and some of the important things that we'll talk about today. We'll kind of address some of the mindful and intuitive aspects of just life in general, but also I'll tie it back to the food and we'll kind of
Yeah.
tag team this here. But really, most importantly, and at least what I hear so often, is just the emotional distress and how that leads to habits and behaviors. So if you can maybe even just talk to us a little bit about your experience in working with your clients in that
Yeah.
realm.
Yeah. Well, the primary demographic or group of people I work with is predominantly adults and adult men and women that have gone through something traumatic. And truthfully, I think we've all experienced some level of trauma in some ways. Trauma is subjective. So it's not based on what other people think, but these traumas that we experience, these hardships, these very distressing experiences shape us. And so we can heal from them and recover and actually thrive, or they can really impact us on our day to day. I mean, I also work with people who experience high stress, whether you have a high stress job, you might be a caregiver. Stress just has such an impact on our overall health as well. And trauma and stress and even eating all intersect, right? When we're emotionally distressed, we want to find something that brings us comfort. And if we aren't aware of what's driving that, if we're not aware of how our body's feeling, what's going on, we're going to turn to things as coping. And sometimes we have healthy coping, like some people like to go to the gym and go kickboxing, and that can be a really great way of coping. Other times we can use that in an abusive way. And I say that that's pretty harsh, but it can be really harmful to us. And so we can over exercise and harm ourselves that way if we're not aware. We can overeat because eating is so comfortable. I mean, like, I love pizza. I love comfort foods, especially here in the Midwest. For those of you who are here, we really want to find things that make us feel good. And so when we don't know what's driving these uncomfortable feelings or we're not tuning into them, we will reach for things that bring us momentary comfort, but that actually have a long-term negative impact on our overall health.
Yeah, that's so important. And I like how you also mentioned too, just how everything is intertwined together, and just your body, your physical being, your emotional being, and then tie that in with the nutrition aspect of it as well. And
Mhm.
something that I find often is when I have clients who are going through major stressful scenarios or situations in their life, they are turning towards food, like you said, for that
Mhm.
comfort. And so a lot of what we talk about is kind of, I call it breaking the chain, and breaking
Mhm.
the chain of events. Like you're
Mhm.
starting off with an unwanted eating habit or an unwanted eating behavior that then leads to more guilt, that then is followed suit by, okay, I'm going to break those habits, and I'm going to, set all these strict rules, and then life happens and it continues on that cycle. So we talk quite a bit about that in with my clients, and I'd love to hear how you maybe help your clients kind of through some of those scenarios and cycles to kind of break the chain.
Yeah, it's different. So in the work that I do, it's very driven by the client. And so whatever they come into my office with, it's about building a sense of agency. A lot of people, especially in the realm of trauma, have lost a sense of choice, have lost a sense of agency. Things have been taken from them. And so it's actually, even though they're wanting something for themselves, it can be really hard to take those things. And so the first thing I do is basically it's a contract between me and the client. What do you want out of this time? And if food is about that, if your emotional eating is about that, I'm going to look at what is driving this. What do you want most out of life? If you want to have a better relationship with food, a better relationship with your body, I might inquire what is on the other side of that. What would life be like if you had this better relationship with yourself and food? And also looking at what gets in the way of that. And so it's not just about the behavior. I'm not a behavioral based therapist. I have techniques that can help with behaviors, but I like to look at what's going underneath that, what's driving the behaviors. And so it's looking at a history of things, like what in your life has shaped you this way, to approach life in this way. And in this case, since we're focusing on dieting and eating, what's happening there? A lot of people have history of watching their parents go through dieting. And that's very, very popular. We look back at all the diets that have happened. I myself have a history of yo-yo dieting as well, and having to break that chain has come from inner work that I've had to do of what's driving us. Oh, I'm not content with myself. Okay, so so we're learning about what's going on underneath. And so that's really, whether it's dieting, whether it's trauma, whether it's stress, no matter what it is, we're looking at what's in the driver's seat and what's causing some of these relationships with food or stress or how you feel about yourself.
I love how you just said when we're even, because a lot of times when people are going through different diet scenarios, the term not content with myself, that doesn't necessarily come up as a first thought. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to get healthier. And then sometimes it'll be like
Mhm.
maybe for the wrong reasons, or like you said, maybe it's overshadowed by that lack of contentment, that lack of confidence in yourself and being comfortable in your own skin. And where does that stem from?
Right.
And a lot of times, I love how you said that too, is because I talk about with my clients too, where the seeds planted. We first have to figure out, we got to dig up the dirt, and we got to see where those seeds have been laid out. And until we can figure that out, we won't know how to truly handle this scenario, because there are
Mhm.
so many underlining deep rooted habits that have been in place for a
Right.
long time.
Right. I mean, think about when you're working with your clients and they want this whole lifestyle change, and you're working on just that external thing, but we're not actually talking about, like, well, what are you wanting? Like, what's actually going to help you be successful at this, and what's actually going to get in the way of your success? We're kind of skipping the whole thing, right? We're skipping all the core parts that's going to help each individual be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And just being able to start to open up that communication can learn a lot about yourself. In my experience too, and maybe yours as well, is just learning and to become aware of where a lot of your thoughts have stemmed from. I mean, you like you mentioned in watching parents, watching other people in your life go through ebbs and flows of yo-yo dieting, and that process can be pretty alarming in the sense that you're watching that, you're observing it, you're seeing that as the norm. So something that we highlight, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, is what are the norms or what are the untold truths that you're telling to yourself every single day? And how can we reframe those thoughts to actually give value or add value to the actions you're trying to achieve or the goals that you're trying to accomplish? And within that, maybe even talking a little bit on your end on how you help people kind of just try to bring that to the surface.
Hmm. Yeah, that's it. It's really actually very complex, understanding the thoughts. A lot of times it's, fear of rejection, like and cultural expectations of like skinny and, pear shaped or whatever it is that is this ideal body shape. And that can look different per culture too. So like every
Mhm.
culture, every demographic, like different places have different expectations of what ideal body types are supposed to look like. And so we need to ask, like what, something just came to mind and then I lost it. But it's about, for me, it's about being curious. So it's not
Mhm.
necessarily trying to reframe thoughts right away. It's actually wondering like, what is that thought?
Mhm.
What are you actually getting from that thought? And so really understanding underlying things. And so that's very broad because it's very customized to the issue that we talk about. But for me, if I can maintain a level of curiosity, that opens up hopefully a level of curiosity for my clients. Once we don't have curiosity about things anymore, it just becomes almost like ingrained in us, like we're just functioning on autopilot,
Mhm.
basically. So
Mhm.
that curiosity piece is what really helps us be more internally inquiring about what's happening for us. And I don't know if that really answers your question or not, but I hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it shed light on a whole other aspect of this is to really stay curious. Stay
Mhm.
curious in your why. Stay curious in the reason behind your actions and the way that you respond. For those who are in a never-ending cycle or feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just stuck, because that's another thing that I'll hear a lot is I feel like I'm
Mhm.
just kind of spinning my wheels and working through that with clients. There are things that I do, but I would love to hear maybe how you even get past that feeling of stickiness?
Hmm. Huh. It's a good question. I
I know
think
it
that
totally
it's
can depend on the scenario too.
yeah, well, it's just a different way, the way I structure therapy because it's hard because part of it is understanding what's driving behaviors, but another part is like actually exploring what is working or successes that they've had or like I talked about earlier, what's on the other side? Like if you were able to reach this goal. Okay, so for an example, what might happen is a goal that a client might have is I want to feel more confident in my body. Okay, well, on the other side of that, like if you had more body confidence, what would be different for you? How would life be different? And they might say like, well, I would feel more of a sense of ease, or I would feel lighter, or I would connect with people more. And then that would be the core of actually what we'd be then focusing on is like, how can we bring you more of a sense of ease, more comfort? And so it
Mm,
becomes less about this external thing of like how my body is and more about like how I'm internally feeling and processing.
mhm,
And then even just moving clients toward these ideas that feel so fleeting and so hard to reach. Like I have clients sometimes say like, I think I would have more ease, but I don't even know what that would be like. That's okay because already we're kind of shifting some like neural processing of how we view stuff. We tend to focus on problems. And now I'm inviting a shift in thinking of like, well, what if things went right? What if things worked? What if things were more easy? What if you felt more confident? And now we have this whole other reel going on in the brain of, well, what if something good happens?
mm,
And what would that be like? So it's like a dual process really. We're addressing the underlying issue, but we're also inviting some positive things, some positive mindsets, some positive shifts.
I think that's brilliant. And because so often people will say the worry of what if this happens? And it's usually in the negative context. So even just like you said, that dual relationship and trying to kind of segue into pivoting more positively, I say that a lot
Mhm.
with my clients. We're going to pivot. We're going to pivot here into a more positive mindset. And instead of asking the what if in the negative realm, what if in the positive realm? And even in those scenarios, I'm going to tie this back into even emotional eating because it's just such an important topic.
Yeah.
Is when you're going through, when I've got someone going through that experience, and they're like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And the anxiety and the fear of the
Mhm.
unknown becomes,
Mhm.
I'm going to reach for this chocolate chip cookie because I know that this is comfortable and this
Mhm.
is going to temporarily fill that void of the unknown that I don't have an experience with yet.
Yeah.
So in kind of shifting into saying, well, what if this was a
Mhm.
possibility, and trying to bridge the gap between using again that mindset or the patterns of habit shifting into that
Mhm.
positive realm, how then do you get from eat the cookie to move in this direction? And that's something I work on a lot too, but even be curious to see too, and how if you've got someone coming in your office, and maybe it's not just emotionally eating, but it's a habit that they're doing over and over and over again. And they're like, okay, like I've been so worried about this and it's leading me to do X. But
Yeah.
then you open up and go into this other mindset of what you just said, and trying to get them to say, what if in a positive way? How do you then shift them in that direction that helps them break
Mm.
the cycle of the habit that's been a pattern forever?
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's very interesting how you could do both of those things. I actually want to revisit something that you just said of like that reaching for a cookie, and because the fear of the unknown can be kind of scary. And I also want to look at that as this is, when we think of a coping mechanism, coping is how we deal with something. And
Hmm.
so we ultimately are thinking, well, this is a bad coping, like, oh no, I reached for that cookie again. And so this whole level of shame comes in. And then we start feeling bad about ourselves. And because we feel bad about ourselves, then we have another cookie because we want to ease that discomfort. And so it becomes this like shaming ourselves and this awful feeling. And even that is a way of responding to something really difficult. And so we look at it from like, I don't want to strip you of your coping mechanisms. That's not really like, because if we take something away before we're ready, well, we know that there's just going to be like, I'm going to give up. I'm not ready for that yet. So we might look at how has that coping served you? And then we
Hmm.
start again, more of that curiosity of like, how is this serving you? Why does it need to be there even in the first place? And so I think having them explore some of these underlying things, it really makes me think of I have the book next to me, Intuitive Eating. I'm sure that you share this book with your clients.
Hmm.
But I did some of this work. I read the book, and there's the workbook, which is really great. You can even just focus on just the workbook because all of it's in there. But it helps you start to understand some of the underlying stuff to what's really going on. If we just focus on dieting, it's not going to be that much different. Right. So I think understanding underlying emotions of all things is going to be really, really helpful to, and that's hard to do because that can be really uncomfortable as well. So I feel like went all over the place there, but hopefully
No, I mean,
that was,
it's because it's such a loop, and you end up back in the same place of really feeling unsettled and uneasy in your home,
Mhm.
your body, the place you have to
Yeah.
live in. And yes, I do love that book, Intuitive Eating, and I've read it, of course, and have
Mhm.
recommended it to several of my clients. And a couple of things, and I would want to talk to that for a minute here, because I'll say the very first time I read it, this was probably more than 10 years ago when I first read it, and then reread it, as time went on. And of course, like as you mature and as you learn things and as things change, you kind of almost have a different perspective on the words or the text. And so
Mhm.
I went from the very first time reading that book to feeling like, how is this going to work? Like, how do you just
Mhm.
give yourself complete um, freedom and flexibility of making that choice? And now I find, oh my gosh, I use that all the time in practice with clients and telling them again, the more restrictions that you place on yourself, the more shoulds that you tell yourself, the more no's, and the more limitations that you have with your nutrition and your experience with nourishment,
Mhm.
it creates a whole level of the want on a whole different playing field, because the restrictions then lead to, that's all I think about, that's all I
Mhm.
want, and that is the only thing that is going to leading back to that comfort. So
Yep.
now you're placing emphasis on the things that you've limited, but that limitation in itself, or those foods that you weren't limiting before, then become the thing that creates comfort. So that's where I see with my clients, is I see that cycle repeat because of those restrictions. So in the
Yeah.
intuitive eating world, when you're open and adding, a lot of what I say with my one-on-ones is we talk about adding value into your nutrition plan, and really trying to seek where we can add in space for, whether it's adding more vegetables or, adding more water. It's really adding in the value
Yeah.
instead of focusing so much on the nose. So almost
Yeah.
pivoting back to what you said before, is you've got this
Yeah.
two worlds of the what if and the no's, and you have
Mhm.
the what if and the yays and the
Yeah.
positive side of things. And it's almost asking, instead of restriction, how can I create more abundance?
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were saying that, I noticed that when we have a I hate to use that word unhealthy, but a difficult relationship with food, the way you were describing it before, of like, I'm feeling something, but I'm just going to eat and I'm going to soothe. And then I'm thinking about it and I have all these thoughts. It's like functioning from the neck up, right? There's all this cognitive stuff happening, but the hunger cues, the how food makes us feel when we eat it, everything is such a physical level, and yet we only focus on things from the neck up, right? We're staying so cognitive, and so intuitive eating invites both. Our body and our brain are not separate, right? They are so interconnected, and yet we separate them. We completely miss the cues of what our body is communicating to us. And that's a big thing of what I do too, is what I call somatic mindfulness. And so this is dropping into our body, dropping in safely if you feel comfortable doing that. But what are you noticing in your body right now before you eat? Since we're talking about dieting and eating and trying to have a healthier relationship with food, what are you noticing in your body before you're eating? Are you aware of your stomach growling? Are you actually full? Is this a sugar craving that you're having that you think you need? Is this like a thought of like so instinctual? Is this a pattern of like overeating for so many different reasons? We could overeat or undereat for so many different reasons, but what is our body communicating to us? And so that is such a relevant thing. We have to not just be cognitive, we need to be cognitive and physical, and bring that mind body connection together with our relationship to many things, food included.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I've never heard it described that way, as just from the neck up. That is so powerful. And I think that
Mhm.
probably ties into your experience even with yoga and being an instructor, is
Yeah.
really being one with moving your body and feeling which muscles are active, and something, I find value in too, and working with my personal training clients, is like, what muscles are we exercising right now? Like, what are we
Yeah.
trying to do here? Are we
Mhm.
breathing in the appropriate format? And same thing with
Mhm.
yoga too. Are you breathing into the movement that you're trying to produce?
Yeah.
And with that being said as well, how do you then, I think that actually could relate to using yoga almost as a way to get more in tune with those cues that you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Because mind body cues is, again, those connections with your body, like you mentioned, with
Mhm.
the stomach, the growling tummy,
Mhm.
the actual feeling of fullness. Is this actual hunger? Is this a craving? Is this an emotion? And we talk
Yeah.
about that a lot with emotional eating. But how, maybe you could even tell us a little bit more about tying in the yoga body
Mhm.
experience with the mind cognitive experience, and how those two may actually help to shift those two, or connect those two together.
Yeah. For those of you who have done yoga, there will always be a posture that drives you nuts. And there's some, and it could be different every time. And for me, it's something different. But when you're holding postures, there can be something that rises up in you and you feel really agitated and you just want to quickly move out, right? And most of the time when we're uncomfortable, we quickly shift to something that just eases that discomfort. Yoga invites curiosity. It invites settling into some discomfort. So the discomfort isn't dictating what we do, but more so it informs us of what's happening. And if we can slowly, and again, this is different for each individual, maybe that's a cue that you need to shift. Maybe your body's actually communicating, I'm in pain. Pain and discomfort are two different things, right? So if you're actually in pain, even being able to understand and distinguish those two differences can be very transformative for you, and yoga can help with that. And if it feels very painful, move out gently, right? Move away from that. But if it feels uncomfortable, well, where's the discomfort? Where in your body is that? Can you breathe? Take a deep breath, right? Can you use your breath even to relax that space that is agitated or tense or tight? And so it's very, very much bringing awareness to how you can even self-regulate, really, beyond using something external to help us regulate.
I love the point that you mentioned too about the levels of discomfort, because something that I'll mention quite often too is almost finding like beauty in shades of gray, trying to find the discomfort, ease into ease into the discomfort to grow. And I think you bring up two really excellent points. Is one, if you are uncomfortable with the pain in the situation that you're experiencing, why aren't you shifting? Why aren't you moving? Why aren't you creating a different path or a different motion? And on the other end of it, it's almost like a double-edged here, but on the other end of it, if we don't have a little bit of discomfort, it isn't going to push us in a different direction. And if we don't have that, like almost getting out of our comfort zone and to move beyond it, we won't reach new heights or new levels or new experiences. So we need a little bit of that discomfort, but we have to make sure we're reading the signs appropriately. So one, rather to shift into and create more space within, or two, whether to move away from and use that as a sign or a tool to really create a pivoting point.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said of like that in that discomfort, that in that gray area of like, how can we find, where it feels okay for us to land? And we, in yoga, we call it finding your edge, like where can you teeter on, this isn't too much for me. I can kind of withstand some of this discomfort and even find some stillness in that. And I think kind of looking back at our conversation today, even I can say that without the understanding, without the knowledge of what our body is communicating, we will continue to resort to our coping. We will continue to resort to dieting because it's really not about the dieting, right? It's about what's underneath driving the dieting. And if we don't know what our body needs, what it's communicating, how it's feeling, what's happening, we're just, again, there's that disconnection. We're missing out on taking care of ourselves in such a nurturing, caring way. And recognizing that tuning into our bodies can be very, very hard for those who have experienced some significant trauma. And so if that's you, this isn't to point out that this isn't another way to shame yourself. This is actually communicating that this happens to people. And if that's you or whoever else is out there, get some support. There's support out there that's out there to safely help you navigate those challenges so that you don't have to resort to coping for the rest of your life.
Awesome. So well said. So, Christy, where can people who are watching this video find you best? What's the best way to get in contact with you to really learn more about your services that you provide and working one-on-one with you?
Yeah, my website is a great place to start, www.verbenacounseling.com. That's Verbena counseling.com. And that has just like all of the stuff that I have right now, like services. Pretty much I'm just working with individual clients through telehealth and in person for those who feel comfortable. And then I also have a Instagram page that is Verbena Counseling. So you could find me there too. And I'll post some things. My emphasis is really on complex PTSD or complex trauma and stress. So that's pretty much what you'll see a lot of there. Yeah, but that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And it has really, just been a pleasure just going through some of these scenarios with you today and talking through all of this. If you guys have any questions on anything we've talked about today or have any questions specifically for Christy, please reach out, post them in the comment section, and we'll make sure we get back to you, in a timely fashion here. So thanks so much for joining us today, Christy, and for your
Yes.
time. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you and looking forward to future collaborations together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the time, for everyone who showed up and was able to watch today or will watch. I really appreciate Ashley and just what she's putting together here and taking the time for me and to have me here. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye.
great day.
You too.